You're listening to The Dangerous Mind of Mark Yoshimoto Nemkov. No excuses, no BS, no pants.
So Mr. Joe Gooch over YouTube wanted to know why I had mentioned that the goalposts were moving in voiceover. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Microphone Playboy podcast. How you doing today? So over in the comments section of the LS208 versus 416 video, I had mentioned how the 208, how I feel that the 208, for me, reflects where voiceover is headed sonically. And Mr. Joe Gooch kindly asked me to elucidate on that. So a little background just to put it all in perspective. I've been doing voiceover since about 2007, and I've been doing it full time since 2013. And during that period of time, I've done thousands and thousands of projects. I've voiced almost 7,000 commercials, believe it or not. And although it seems like the industry doesn't change much, it has changed a great deal, in my perspective. So, from my experience, I can tell you that there was a major tectonic shift right around that time when the John Krasinski Esurance commercials came out. Now remember those? Now those were really different. They were different from everything else because his delivery was so conversational. But it wasn't just conversational. It was conversational, but there was like a little bit of a wink and a grin, really kind of a smirk to it. Because he was talking to you like you would talk to your best friends. And you know how you talk to your best friends, right? The people you know really well. The people you can kind of egg on and rib a little bit. You know somebody, if they drop their piece of pizza and it falls face down on the floor, you can go, yeah, nice one. And they won't take it too personally. You know, that kind of person. And it wasn't just personable like that. It was also like the voice of your smart cousin. You know who I'm talking about. You know, the person when you were kids, the first person to give you a beer when your parents weren't looking. And if you were around and working during that time, you probably remember that almost every commercial spec that came out was like referenced the John Krasinski Esurance commercials. You know, John Krasinski from The Office, right? And from that evolved this widespread desire throughout the industry for you to talk to the listener, like as your friend, really just in a very conversational way. And though voiceover had started to become less salesy, this was really the Mrs. O'Leary's cow of the conversational voiceover trend that we are seeing carrying over today. And that has also reflected this visual trend that you see in commercials a lot more, where you see a lot more like regular people. You see more different types of regular people are represented visually in commercials. I can honestly tell you that probably about 75% of all the job specs I see are conversational. They reference conversational. But the way that has evolved, now clients are asking for voiceovers that sound like they're not coming from people who do voiceovers. And it's not just less polished deliveries that they want. They want it to sound less like advertising. And the advertising sound is really the same sound that we covet as industry standard sounds. The U87, the mid-forwardness of the U87, the aggressiveness of a 416. And this should not surprise you because think of how the world has changed. Think about how much has really changed. Not just the way we consume media, but the type of media we consume. Do you remember the first time you heard yourself through a 416? Or when you heard a 416 and you recognize that tonality, you recognize that, you're like, oh, that's the movie sound, that's the TV sound, that's broadcast sound. That's a professional level broadcast sound. That's what I've been hearing, right? Or you hear an 87 and you're like, oh yeah, that's the sound. But unfortunately, to some extent, those tonalities occupy the mental real estate in some people as advertising. And because we now live in a world where everybody is cynical AF, that advertising sound sounds like manipulation, as opposed to someone just giving you advice and just talking to you, your best friend, your cool cousin. So where it used to be just like every so often I would see somebody, reference, we don't want it to sound too polished. We don't want it to sound like advertising. I see that every day now in audition specs. Every day. And where exactly does this come from? What exactly influenced this to change this? And I'm telling you, it's podcasts, it's content, it's the sound of content creation, which is generally done on, let's just be honest, on lesser equipment than you would use for professional voiceover for the most part. The way I like to refer to it personally is it's less in your face and more in your space, right? It's really kind of more the sound of us sitting across the table from each other and having just talking about it, just shooting the bull about whatever. And there's a train of thought here that leads me to believe that the pandemic also had something to do with this. Because, during the pandemic, on-location recording for people, whether it was, voice acting or voiceover, was really curbed. People were doing more recording from home, and, a lot of people were doing it for the first time from home. And I think the proliferation of Rode NT1s in these new work-at-home environments really drastically changed what was acceptable. And we're also seeing more members of Gen Z become the gatekeepers of, voiceover. They're producers, they're casting people. And for the greater part, that's a generation that grew up listening to music that was a lot different than the music that my generation grew up listening to. Music that was really more top-end oriented, pop music, where there was more detail on the top end, more air and detail on the top end. And not so much of that vintage warm squish. And from my vantage point, I think it's the confluence of all of these factors coming together that is creating, I would say, a new standard for voiceover. And if I were to try to codify what that new standard is as a mathematical equation, it would be detail is greater than warmth. Detail greater than warmth. Now, I'm not saying at all that there is no place for the industry standard sounds of the 416, of the 87. There is definitely place for warmth. But where I see the 208 really fitting in is to fulfill this new requirement, I think, on some jobs for a more modern sound. Something that can deliver the punch and intelligibility of a 416 without having that familiar advertising sound. And let me just jump over to the 208 real quick. I don't know why I didn't do the whole episode with the 208, but I do feel like there is a need for this more modern, more detailed top-end sound. Especially if you're talking about a voiceover that has to compete with a music bed or fight through a busy mix. Because, the truth is that there is less post-production and less actual mixing happening now than there was before. So your track has to sit cleanly on top of something. Go put on the TV and watch some commercials and listen to the frequency range of the music that's in the music beds. The frequency range that you hear in music beds does not include a lot of high-end frequency energy, right? There's not a lot of air that you hear in the music in a commercial unless the music is the only thing. But if there's a voiceover, that VO will be the primary element occupying the upper mids and the high end. I personally think that the 208 is absolutely going to kill on this type of stuff. Adapt or perish, my friends. Adapt or perish. So what do you think? What is your experience? What is your opinion? Are you seeing the same thing happening that I'm seeing happen? You know what to do. Leave a comment. All right, until next time, this is Mark Yoshimoto Nemkov, fading to black.